Assalamu alaikum everyone. In our last session, we have learned about subqueries in SQL. Now we will perform some tasks related to subquery. So the first task we have is find all the tracks in the album with the title Let There Be Rock. So we have to find those tracks which are present in the album with the title Let There Be Rock. Now if you see at this statement, in order to find those tracks that belong to this album, first we have to find the album with this title. So we know that we have to use subquery to find the album with this title, and then we will find the tracks that belong to this album. So let's open SQLite. First I will open the sample database. I will set header on and output mode as column. Okay, now I will write the query. So in outer query we have to give the track information, so we can select track ID, track name and album ID from tracks. So the query will be select track ID, album ID, name from tracks, where. Now we have to apply condition that where album ID equals to. Now album ID will be equal to some value here, and that value we will find from the subquery. So and subquery we will write in parentheses. So the subquery will be select album ID, because we are comparing album ID, so we will just select album ID column here, from albums, where title is equals to Let There Be Rock, I think. Yes, the title we have is Let There Be Rock. So we are applying the condition on this title column, that when there is a title named as Let There Be Rock, give us the album ID against that. So because this is a string, we will write it in inverted commas. Let there be rock. We will close the parenthesis and terminate it. Okay, so now we got those tracks, we got the information of those tracks that belong to this album Let There Be Rock. We have displayed the album ID here, which is 4. This album ID is actually the album ID of this. We can actually confirm it. Select album ID, comma, title from albums, where title is equals to Let There Be Rock. So we got this album ID 4 against this title, so it means that our result is correct. So you can see that first it will execute this subquery and it will give us the album ID of the album that has title Let There Be Rock. And after getting the result of this subquery, we will get the album ID and we will compare if this album ID is equals to that album ID. So we will give the information about those tracks that has album ID 4. Okay, so next we have a statement find all the albums that belong to artist Kashkale. Okay, so now we have to find the albums that belong to artist Kashkale. So we have to display album ID, title and artist ID from albums, and then we will apply subquery on this artist table based on condition on this name column, because we are given the artist name. So the query will be select album ID, title, artist ID from albums, where artist ID is equals to, now we will write the subquery and we will select artist ID from artist table, where name equals to we have the name as Karshkale. Karshkale. We will close the bracket. Okay, we didn't get any result. Now I want to tell you that here I have written Karshkale all in small letters, but in question the first letter of Karsh, K, is capital, and similarly for K. So let's just exactly write it in the way it is stored in our database. Now you can see that we have got that album ID along with its title, which is Realize, that has been published by artist ID 199, which is the artist ID of this Karshkale. We can confirm it again as select artist ID name from artists, where name equals to Karshkale. So the ID of this artist Karshkale is 199. So our result is correct. This is the album with the title Realize that has been published by artist Karshkale. So in a similar way like the previous query, first we are getting that artist ID where name is Karshkale, and then we are comparing this to this result. If the artist ID matches with this artist ID, then we are getting the information of that album. Okay, next we have list the customer names whose sale representatives are in Canada. Okay, so here we have this customer table, and here we have this support representative ID, which is actually the sales representative ID, and we have to find those customer names whose sale representatives are in Canada. So we know that these sale representatives are actually the employees of this company that are dealing with the customers, and we want to find the employees in Canada, because the condition here is that list the customer names whose sale representatives are in Canada. First we have to find those employees that live in Canada, and then we have to give the customer information to whom they are dealing. So we have to find the employees in Canada who are dealing with customers, because we have to give customer information in our final result. So we will select customer ID, first name, last name from customers, because we want this information in our final result, where that support representative ID in. Now we'll write the subquery, select employee ID from employees, where country is equals to Canada. Okay, so we got the information about those customers whose support representatives live in Canada. Okay, so now you can see that we have used in operator because there can be multiple employees that lives in Canada. So we will match the value of support representative ID with the values that will be provided by this subquery. So this subquery will provide us with the employee IDs that live in Canada. For example, just for example, 1, 2, 3 are the employee IDs of employees that live in Canada. So we will get the list 1, 2, 3 here. And then if you look at this query, this outer query, we will show the information of those customers whose support representative ID in either 1, 2 or 3. So where the support representative ID will be equal to either 1 or 2 or 3, we will get information for those customers. These are the customers who are being served by the employees that live in Canada. Okay, next we have find the customers who have invoices. Now we have to find the customers who have invoices. Okay, so we know that we have this customer ID as common column here. So we have to find if the customer ID of customers is equals to the customer's ID of invoices. So if it will return any row based on this condition, it means that that customer has invoice, otherwise not. So we will use exist for this query. First, let me just clear this. Okay, So the query will be, we have to give customer information again. So select customer ID, first name, last name, company, from customers, C, where exists. Now we will write the subquery as select one from invoices where customer ID equals to C dot customer ID. Okay. So these are the customers who have invoices. This was the statement, and we have found out those customers who have invoices. How we have got this information? Here we have written in the subquery as select one from invoices where customer ID is equals to C dot customer ID. So this customer ID belongs to invoices and this C dot customer ID belongs to customers. Here it is written as select one. So for every time this condition will be true, it will return 1. Okay. So if we are getting any one from this subquery, it means that the exist will return true and we will get the information against that customer ID. And if there is a customer ID that has no matching value in invoices, it means that that particular customer doesn't have any invoice. So it will not return anything from the subquery and exist will return false. So when exist will return false, we will not get this information, of course. So in this way, we can find out that which customers have invoices. We can write this same query by using join as well. But now because we are doing practice for subquery, we have used subquery to solve this task. Next, we have find all the artists who do not have any album in the albums table. Okay, so there will be some artists who do not have any albums. So we will again use the exist operator. But now the statement is we have to find the artists who do not have any albums in the table. So we will use not exist here. Okay, I will clear it. Now the query will be select static from artists A where not exist. Now we'll write the subquery as select one from albums where artist ID equals to A dot artist ID. Okay, so this is exists, not exist. So I have to write exists. Okay, now we got the information about those artists who do not have any albums. If you see at the query, first this subquery will run. It's written here as select one from albums where artist ID is equals to A dot artist ID. So this query will return 1 for any matching value of artist ID from artist table and artist ID of album. For any row that satisfies this condition, it will return 1. But here it not exists. So when it will return 1, this will return false because here it is written not exist. So for the artist that has albums, this will return false and we will not display this information. But for the artists that do not have any matching value in the album table, this will return true. Again, because of this not written here. And when it will return true, we will get the information about those artists who do not have any albums. You can also write static here. I have used 1 here so that if you see some query written as select 1, so you don't get confused. Select 1 means that we actually get 1 whenever this condition is true. And most of the times we use select 1 with exist and not exist. This is a common practice. Okay, so these were the different tasks related to subquery. I hope you understand.